Hello there, fish people. This is Drux. Welcome to the dark land of Mordor, otherwise known as South Africa, where we are suffering from load shedding, which is the power being off with 2.5 to sometimes 4.5 intervals several times a day. So there's been a lot of discussion on all the Facebook groups and WhatsApp groups on how do you handle load shedding. Now there are better solutions than the ones I'm going to show you. These are just what I find is the best balance between being economical and effective. So if you have a very generous landlord, or if you have 6 figures lying around, get yourself a battery inverter on-off grid system with solar panels. That will be your best solution. If you can get a generator and your complex allows it, get that. Or if you are willing to spend, or if you can spend between 7,000 and 10,000 rand on a portable inverter, you can get that also. Now, if you're not going to spend in the thousands, this is the solution that I have, and touch wood, I have not lost a fish to load shedding yet. Okay, I netted out a tetra the other day, but that one was more than 3 years old, so I suspect it was just age. All the other fish were fine. But I've not had any losses or crashes yet. And this has been going through the stage 4 now for a long time. We've had stage 6 where we had 4.5 periods of out electricity. It coped with that as well. Now there's one item, we all talk about battery operated air pumps and insulation, and I'm going to get to that, but there's one item that I don't see mentioned that I'm going to mention now. I hear a lot of people say, oh, I blew a filter, a power filter, a pump, a heater from all this load shedding and I have to replace it. Now the load shedding on-off does put strain on these items of equipment, but I haven't lost one yet, and I think I know what the reason is for that. Now down here, that's the very first thing you've got to look at with load shedding, because I think that's the reason many of you are blowing heaters and blowing pumps. This red plug in the semi-transparent plastic is just called a surge protector. I forgot what the brand name is. You can find it at any hardware store. You plug it into the plug, and then you plug your main power source in there. So I've got the lead plugged into that surge protector, and then it goes all the way to the back here to a multi-plug, and that's where all the fish tank things, all the equipment are plugged in. But from the source there is this surge protector. It's a cheap item, you can get it at any hardware store. You get this version that protects against any power surges, and there's a different version of a plug that I'll show you now. Here is the other version. It does essentially the same thing. It has a little timer. When the power goes back on, it keeps the plug switched off for I think 20 or 30 seconds so that any surges can go away, and then it switches it on. It gives you that time lapse. It does the same thing. It protects you against power surges. Either one of these plugs, I think your chances of blowing a heater or pump or a filter pump is going to be a lot less. So that's a good starting point. We've all forgot to talk about that. That leads me to the next thing. I see a lot of you use battery powered air pumps, and that's a great thing to use. We've got to keep the circulation going, but we also want to keep the filtration going. You want to keep some biological filtration going, and for that I prefer the AC/DC air pump. This is a Sobo SP4000. That is your cheapest one. The AC/DC air pump has got rechargeable batteries, but it remains connected to the power with a USB plug. You can see that little light is green now. So the power is off, it's running on battery power. When the power goes on, that little light turns red, and it continues working seamlessly, and then it works off the main power and the battery charges. Now why do I prefer these as to your rechargeable air pumps? It's because I don't only run an air stone, I attach a sponge filter to it. Now it's very old school. I used to have all power filters, but when load shedding came in, I made a point of running an extra sponge filter in each aquarium. That way the air keeps going and the filtration keeps going. Just going to try and show you here. There you can see there's one sponge filter running off this one, and there is another one in the small nano tank over there. So the filtration keeps running. I've looked around online, you can pick these up for under 600 Rand, right? It's not a cheap for an air pump, but I find this particular one is a smaller one. It can run 2 filters and 2 medium to small tanks like this, or 1 in a big tank. And it does last those 2.5 hour sessions. It even lasts the 4.5 hour sessions. It's went through those 4.5 hour sessions, kept going, no drop in performance. That is your best solution. Get one of these and put it on a sponge filter. If that 500 Rand, 600 Rand is still too much for you, you can use these rechargeable air pumps from Boyo. You see it's also got an intermittent setting that it just blows the bubbles off for a bit, blows the bubbles off for a bit. If you really need to make it last for long periods of load shedding, or otherwise a continuous stream of bubbles. The disadvantage is it needs to be recharged. It doesn't automatically switch between wall power and battery power. So you're going to use this when the load shedding is on, then you're going to charge it when the load shedding is off. Now, if you're just running an Airstone, you can even get a cheaper version that just uses a torch battery that switches on when the power goes off. If it's just running an Airstone to keep circulation going, that's perfectly fine. But if you're running a filter on it, a sponge filter like I like to do, you know, that filter has to run all the time to keep biologically active. So I prefer the AC/DC one, but if you can't afford it, then you can use this one. It's only that if you're running a filter on it and the power is back on, then you need to take it out and put in your normal air pump that operates from the plug. You know, and I'm not at home all the time to do that. So that's why I prefer the AC/DC Sobo SB4000 air pump. You get bigger versions with over 1,000 Rand. Alright, that is something you can use, the rechargeable air pump or the battery air pump, if you do not want to fork over 500 and something Rand, which I think is very reasonable to keep your fish alive for the AC/DC air pump. Just as you can see, I've got another one running here in the cabinet on my big 75 gallon, exactly the same thing, and also load shedding very well. Before that I had a bigger Boyo air pump that blows a lot more air. I have found though, when we had 4.5 hour load shedding sessions of this one, there's not enough time in between those long sessions for the pump to recharge properly, so it got weaker and weaker and weaker, and then I had to take it off, switch it off and give it a long charge to get it back to full strength again. Whereas with this smaller Sobo one, I haven't found that. It lasts through all of that. I didn't need to do anything. To it. And this twin outlet is a small twin outlet pump, but I use both outlets to run one sponge filter in the big tank here. I'm going to try and show you. There's the sponge filter running. There's a big sponge filter there at the back sitting there, and it's a deep tank. It's a much deeper or higher tank from bottom to top, or top to bottom than those other tanks. So you need a bit more oomph, but that small AC/DC air pump keeps a big sponge filter here in the corner running. Now the next thing we have here is temperature. Now I'm fortunate, I'm in the Western Cape, so if our load shedding sessions are supposed to be 2.5 hours by 2.5 hours, if it's 4.5 hours by 4.5 hours, so I don't suffer maybe from as much as you guys do, but I keep my temperature at about 26-27 degrees, and the power is going to go on soon now, and you can see it doesn't drop that much. It's 24.4, which is perfectly fine for the fish. If I go look over there to the other tank, that's 24.2. It doesn't run quite as high. I think that's about 26 degrees. So I run them a degree or two higher. Now the other thing is insulate. If you have longer periods, first we overlook for obvious things like with the surge plugs. Insulate the room that you're in. Put a gas heater in the room, or make sure that your house is insulated. Start there. And then there's plenty of been said about that, but you can wrap blankets around the tank. You can have space blankets that you can buy at an outdoor store or pharmacy. You can tie that up with Velcro around the tank to insulate the tank. That's probably your best solution, because running heaters off battery power, it kills the batteries. That is a big headache. But we've already now solved saving your equipment from surges and keeping some biological filtration going. So with a heat, insulate, space blankets, styrofoam sheets, the room that the fish are in. I fortunately don't really have to do it. The big tank downstairs is in a very cold room. When it's 4.5 hour load shedding sessions, it goes down to about 23 degrees, which is still okay for a fish. What you can do, if you want the temperature to go up quicker once the load shedding stops, you can put an extra heater in the tank set to the same temperature, and that'll get the temperature back up quicker. But temperature takes some time to drop. So if it's not too long and you insulate the room well and you insulate the tanks, I have not needed to insulate my tanks, I'm lucky. Then it's about insulation to keep the heat going, and maybe you can have a stronger heater to get it up quicker and run the tanks a little bit higher than you would normally do it, so it's not such a quick drop to cold water. Now the next thing is about which power filters last the load shedding better. Now here's a tiny little hang-on back filter on the smallest tank. You can see it's not an aqua clear. I have aqua clears as well. I used to run them and now in the garage. It's not an aqua clear, but it works sort of on the same concept. It's a tiny little Chinese make hang-on back filter, and it's got the motor on the outside that sucks water in from the tank. Now if load shedding hits, some of the water back siphons. So you can see the water level in the hang-on back filter does drop. But you can see there's still some water in. Some of the sponge gets exposed, and the bacteria will still be alright, but the water level drops, and then sometimes the water just turns around when its power switches back on. It doesn't want to pull through, and sometimes it doesn't, but sometimes I get home and this thing is just going around and around, and I have to quickly add some water in the filter and then it goes again. Now that is a bit of a headache with these small hang-on back filters. The bigger they are, the less they have that trouble. But I do find with the very small ones where the motor sits outside, they do have some trouble getting going during load shedding. Okay, now here is another hang-on back filter. Sorry, Charles CH, I know you hate these filters. They do have some flaws that I agree with you, but they do have some good aspects as well. Now here you can see the water level doesn't drop, it doesn't back siphon, because the pump sits inside the tank. It pushes the water through the filter instead of sucking it from the outside. So there's no back siphoning, so the entire basket where your media sits remains wet. It doesn't sort of drain to half its level or something like that, and it starts effortlessly when the power goes up again. So it preserves the bacteria a little bit better, and you have an easier startup after a power failure. And that is the one advantage of these Seachem tidal hang-on back filters over the ones like the Aqua Clears where the motor sits at the back. I have to say though, if you have a bigger Aqua Clear, like that big 110 that CH has, or an Aqua Clear 300 that I used to run, they'll start up after load shedding on their own, as long as the filter is close enough to the surface. They don't have that problem of starting up. They tend to do that, but the water level does drop more than it does in the tidal when the power goes out. Now in terms of other power filters that handle the load shedding better, that doesn't crash as easily. You see I've got an internal power filter here. There the power comes on. I just heard something beep, and these are sitting in the tank, so the media remains wet, so the bacteria lasts the power outages much better. I haven't had any filter crashes in my tanks. I've actually survived a stage 4 without the AC/DC air pump with a power filtration, and with a biological filtration going. I still managed to survive it, because these filters that sit in the tank, they are by no means the best filters you can buy. Canisters are much better, but they do. There the power comes on, there you see the flow at the leaves there, it starts going again. By no means the best filters, but I do find that they handle the load shedding a bit better. The filters that sit inside the tank where the media remains completely covered in water, or in a hang-on back where they're at least partially wet or fully wet. You can see the hang-on back is just started running again. There it goes. So you don't have that problem with a tidal. So now the power's gone on, I'm back up upstairs to the small nano tank here. And here's a thing with the small hang-on backs. The bigger ones, as I've said, there's enough oomph in the motor to pull through. But now this guy back siphoned too much. And you can see it's just churning water around. So the filter is still wet. The bacteria is not all going to die all of a sudden, but it's partially exposed. It's not good, it's noisy, it's not working optimally. And if I'm not at home, then it's going to take longer before I do this. And just put water in there. And then it takes a little while filling that water up the pipe. You see there it goes. It's getting there. And it's going to start up in a few moments. I'm not sponsored by anybody, not sponsored by Seachem. Actually wish they would. I had Aquaclear filters, they work very well. But with the small hang-on back filters, Aquaclear doesn't make one this small, so I shouldn't say Aquaclear. But the smaller ones, the very smallest Aquaclear, I've also had this in the past, where after the power's out, they don't always start right up because that siphon gets air in it, or it back siphons, and there you see it now, it starts. But I had to be here to quickly give it a prime. Anyhow, that is it for me. You'll see there at the back of this tank, there's also an internal power filter. As I've said, they're not the best filters, but they're good. They do the job. The sponges do turn biological and develop into biological media. They handle these on-off power periods, I think, the best, along with the sponge filters. So that's it from me. Points I'm trying to make: get a surge plug to protect your equipment. Get an AC/DC air pump like I think the Sobo 4000. It is a little noisier than I would like, but that's your best loadshedding solution coupled to a sponge filter. If not, you have to change the pumps in and out. If you want to use a cheaper rechargeable or torch battery operated ones, you can do it. Run a sponge filter on it or change it in and out if you want to run the sponge filter. But this is how I've been keeping my fish going so far with all the load shedding going on, and you can see they're happy and they're ready to go. One final tip, guys, before I forget. You can see I like to thaw out the frozen food here on top of the LED light. Don't feed your fish just before the lights go out, because they're going to eat. The extra bio load on the tank is going to create some trace amounts of ammonia, and then if your lights go out, you don't have your filters going, or in my case you don't have all your filters going. I'll still have a sponge filters going to neutralize that. So to be on the extra safe side, I wait till the power goes on again and then I feed them, because then I know I've got a couple of hours of all my filters running after this. So feed your filters when the lights, feed your fish when the light goes on, or when you know there's still a couple of hours of power that you're going to have. Don't feed them just before the power goes out. Okay, that's it from me. Guys, please, if you like this video, if you found it useful, please press that like button. Please subscribe if you watch this long. You might as well. I'm going to do a lot more store tours here around the Cape Town area, trying to build this channel for South African fish keeping. So please give us a like and please subscribe. I would greatly appreciate that. Until I see you again, keep taking care of our domestic denizens of the deep and enjoy fish keeping.